Any other comments now or questions? Yeah, go ahead.
Regarding the stereotypes, it's my impression that most of the stereotypes in this area are not so much vis-a-vis Islamic, but so much as Arab. In other words, I think a lot of Americans, they see an Arab and then they get their field of stereotypes, and I don't even know that a lot of them relate to Islam. It's just like an Arab. And I was wondering, in the Arab community itself in the United States, how many are actually Muslims, and of those, how many are really devout Muslims to where they're really practicing?
Most of the Arabs in this country are Christians.
That's right.
That's a good question.
That's an important thing to realize.
And like Ralph Nader is probably the most famous Arab American, right? And he's a Christian, right? And then Abu Razak, who was a congressman, another very well known. He's also a Christian. Khalil Gibran, who's, most people are familiar with the Book of the Prophets and things like this.
Chasing cases.
Yeah,
John Sununu is another Christian Arab American. What was her name? Shalala.
Danny Thomas.
Shalala. Who's now in the cabinet with. And these are all Christian.
The former
Christian Americans. Danny Thomas was Lebanese.
Well, let me ask the question even in a more
guy on MASH, I can't remember, who was always dressed like a woman, was also a Lebanese Christian.
Most of them are Christians.
Well, for a lot of Americans, the Arab that they see is the Arab that owns the gas station, especially in California.
They're usually Iranians.
And they are, they're immigrants. Now, are they?
They're usually Iranians. They're actually Iranians. They're not Arabs. Yeah, so there's a stereotype. When he's from the Middle East, it must be an Arab.
And I believe that the leader of Hamas that's been mentioned, George Habash.
George Habash is a Christian Arab also.
Tariq Ali is a Christian, and they
I think generally though, most Americans don't even know there's Christian Arabs. That's the truth. Most Americans, this kind of, most of them they think Arab.
Yeah, that's right.
They think Arab, and then you'll get a whole spectrum. And there was an interesting film done called the Hollywood Arab, the TV Arab. And the point of this guy, it goes right from the Sheikh of Araby with Rudolph Valentino. When an Arab wants a woman, he just takes her. That was one of the famous lines from that film. And he was a romantic character, right? He was a romantic character, and there was a lot of women that, it became a kind of fantasy there, getting seduced by the Arab sheikh. But then you get into the 70s where you get the hook-nosed, the OPEC Arab, right, with the four wives, with all wearing veils, driving in the Rolls Royce, obnoxious. I think there was a Disney film that caused some problems where the Habibs were the next door neighbors to a family, and they were very obnoxious. That was a recent.
It's funny you should say the hook nose, because that's a classic stereotype that is often given to Jews.
Right. The Arabs.
Propaganda.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting, but if you study propaganda.
Faces of the Enemy. It's a brilliant book on propaganda and how how faces are distorted. One of the things that the New Republic did during the Gulf War is they had a picture of Saddam Hussein and they literally clipped off his mustache in a way that you would not notice. Right? They just clipped it off enough not to make it look like Hitler, but enough to, in the subconscious, for there to kind of have some kind of anchoring or identification there. So I think you're going to get a lot of different type of stereotypes going on, but generally, most Americans, my own experience, is that they really do associate Arab with Muslim, right? And the word is either Muslim, Arab, they worship Allah, this type of thing.
Especially on the East Coast.
Yes.
You'd be surprised. Yeah, I think you'd be surprised. California, you would be amazed. I'm really serious, because I'm there in California. And I'm always amazed at, Actually, San Francisco's Southern California. You're thinking might be a little different, maybe, but you're dealing with it, huh?
I was going to say one thing about Sesame Street. Now, Sesame Street had they have word association things with the letters coming up, and they had one for the word danger, and it was an Arab. They had different things. This word, that word, and different pictures came up, and the voice came out, danger. Shaykh-looking man,
Right.
but an Arab. And then that book was printed recently, which meant well. It was, the proceeds of it were to go to homeless shelters for children. And so I was kind of familiar with this book because I was director of community services as well. And the book was published with about a child saying, sometimes I wish I had my own room, sometimes I wish we could go back home again, sometimes things get kind of scary, and there's lots of things that frighten me. And the part about being frightened depicted him lying in his bed with an Arab in the closet with this horrible scowl on his face and a dagger between his teeth. And this was a book that was really trying to do well.
Well, you see this also, the Asians got the brunt of this, the Fu Manchu syndrome, which is an interesting book also, The Oriental Menace, which was how Hollywood kind of perpetrated, and that was at the time when China and Japan, there was a lot of problems, right? And the Asian got the brunt of a lot of these stereotypes, and they're still dealing, right? The inscrutable Asian, and they're still dealing, the Asian community. So I think every community that comes to this country that is not from the dominant Anglo-Saxon grouping, there's a wonderful book now, just came out a little while ago, called When the Irish Became White, which is just letting people know that the Irish used to be at the bottom of the totem pole, right? I mean, Irish people in this country, a lot of people don't know the history of the Irish and what they went through to establish their rights and even 1960, John F. Kennedy, that was a big debate, and although it was partly because Roman Catholic, but part of it was an Irishman, becoming president of the United States was still a big shock, the Mick syndrome and things like that. And people from the East Coast probably are more familiar with this because of So I think the Arabs are just a new group. The Indo-Pak people, these are new immigrants to this country. They're going to have to deal with the same stuff that everybody else had to deal with. And the problem is that we do have Islam. They don't only have their Indo-Pakness or their Arabness, but they have a religious, because it's not just the color that's alien, the accent that's alien, it's also some subconscious problems that we're dealing with religion. And lest we forget, the Muslims to the European Christian West was the evil empire for several hundred years. Russia lasted, 45, 50 years. The Muslims, children were scared to go to bed by telling them about Turks and things like that in Europe. So that's part of our collective consciousness, is that there is a deep-seated fear of the Saracen, the Turks at the Viennese gates, the Barbary coast, from the shores of Montezuma to the halls of Tripoli. Right? Tripoli was Barbary. They were called the Barbary pirates, who, according to the Muslims, were actually the Navy. Right? They were the Ottoman Navy. Right. So you've got a lot of problems, and I think that people have. If you want to come to this country, it's sink or swim. That's the nature of America. You got to deal with it. Hopefully, that there will always be sympathetic people that stand up, for what's right. And there have been in this country. There have been people from the dominant culture that have recognized this is wrong. There are people that did stand by the Jews as they were asserting their rights. There are people that stood by the African American, and that's all. That has been part and parcel of the American experience. That there are good people within the dominant culture, and I think Paulo Freire's point is well taken, that in the oppressor-oppressed cycle, the cycle can really only be broken from within the oppressive group, right? Because the oppressed, it's not possible for them. The cycle has to come. It's our children, that have to, from this dominant culture, that have to. We have to transmit. We can break the cycle. That it is possible, but it's the human condition as well. So we're going to have a lot of problems on the way. And we're hoping all of you are going to go out and hopefully do some of the work, of breaking down the stereotypes and educating some people.
Okay.